This is Alex Hollingsworth here with Holling Tech Software, and I'm about to go through a quick walkthrough of all of the features in our new SpectaRuler app. SpectaRuler uses your shoe size, the accelerometer, and the camera in the iPhone to measure the objects around you. Let's get started with Part 1, Setting Your Shoe Size. First, tap the Settings and Instructions button, and then tap the Shoe Size button. You'll notice that SpectaRuler includes a variety of shoe sizing conventions, as well as men's, women's, and children's sizes when applicable. U.S. shoe sizes vary for athletic type shoes, so if you're wearing U.S. basketball, tennis, running, or other athletic shoe, select the athletic option. Simply tap your sizing convention, swipe the picker wheel at the bottom, and click the Set Shoe Size button. Next, we have Part 2, which is calibrating the device. Start by tapping the calibration button within the Settings and Instructions window. Place the device into a door frame such that the right edge and the back face are both vertical, and press Calibrate. If you accidentally tap the calibration button, simply tap the X to cancel the operation. Otherwise, wait a few moments for calibration to complete and tap the back button to go back to the menu. We're now ready to start measuring. Before we get started, let me quickly go over the details of the display window. At the top, you will see the zoom button, which will zoom the live image on the screen by up to 4 times. Immediately below that is the inclinometer, which shows the current up-down tilt of the device. Below the inclinometer is the steps indicator. The steps indicator gives the current heel-to-toe step setting required between measurements. Tap the steps indicator to get a picker wheel to appear on the screen. You can then adjust the step count from a range of 2 steps to 100 steps. Tap the step count button when you are finished. Below the steps indicator is the crosshair. Align the center of the crosshair with the target as instructed for all measurements. Tap near the crosshair to initiate measurements. At the bottom of the screen is the status indicator, which will provide you with step-by-step instructions as you measure. In the bottom left corner of the screen is the back button, which will end measurements and return to the main menu. And last is the cancel button, which can be tapped if a measurement is accidentally initiated. The cancel button will appear after a measurement begins and must be tapped before a measurement is finished. Distance and elevation determines the horizontal distance and change in elevation from the camera lens on your iPhone to the target that you are measuring. I start by tapping the Distance and Elevation button on the main screen. The display window pops up and gives us a live feed of the camera. To improve visibility, I tap the Zoom button twice to bring the zoom to 3 times. Since the pool is in front of me, I choose to only take 14 steps. The step count is up to you, but more steps will often improve accuracy. Usually, try to close a quarter to a half of the initial distance between you and the target. I'm measuring the distance and elevation change to the top of the window on the 3rd floor balcony. Notice that I tilt the phone without moving it around. This is very important. Moving the phone up, down, or closer or further from you will compromise accuracy. When I have the crosshair aligned with my target, I tap near the crosshair and hold the phone steady while the status indicator blinks. Starting with both feet side by side, I begin to take 14 heel-to-toe steps. After the 14th step, I bring my trailing foot forward so that both of my feet are again sitting side by side. Then I just tilt to align, tap, hold it steady, and watch as the measurements appear on the screen. The first line tells me the elevation. The second line tells me the distance from the device to the target before any steps were taken, and the third line tells me the distance after the steps. You can tap the feet and meters buttons to switch between units, and when you are done, tap the measure another target button. Distance and height determines the horizontal distance from the camera lens to the target, and also determines the height of the vertical target that you are measuring. When measuring distance and height, you can walk across uneven terrain, and you can also measure targets that are higher or lower than you. After tapping the distance and height button, I set the step count to 24 steps. I hold the phone at a comfortable height, tilt to align the crosshair with the top of the tree, and tap the screen. When finished, I decide that I want to zoom in, so I tap the zoom icon twice. I then tilt to align the phone with the bottom of the tree and tap the screen. To show how the cancel button can be used, I repeatedly tap it here to stop recording the lower measurement. With the crosshair properly aligned, I tap the screen and wait for the status indicator to stop blinking. Starting with both feet aligned, side by side, I start pacing out 24 heel-to-toe steps directly toward my target. Remember that when measuring distance and height, SpectaRuler will compensate for uneven terrain. After the 24th step, I bring my trailing foot forward and line it up with my lead foot. Remember that you always start and finish with both feet side by side. Also remember that if you need to change the steps indicator, now is your last chance. I now repeat the previous measurement steps, tilting to align the crosshair with the top of the target and tapping the screen to measure. After the indicator stops blinking, I tilt to align the crosshair with the bottom of the target and tap the screen again. And as before, the measurements come up with height on the first line, distance before steps on the second line, and distance after steps on the third line. Distance, height, and width determines the horizontal distance from the camera lens to the target and also determines the height and the width of the vertical rectangular target that you are measuring. When measuring distance, height, and width, you can walk across uneven terrain, and you can also measure targets that are higher, lower, and to the left or right of your vantage point. I begin by tapping the distance, height, and width button. The step count is already set to 20, so I go ahead and tilt the device to align, tap, and begin taking the heel-to-toe steps. Starting with both feet aligned, side by side, I start pacing out 20 heel-to-toe steps directly toward my target. Remember that when measuring distance, height, and width, SpectaRuler will compensate for uneven terrain. Because of space limitation, I am unable to take 20 steps, which is not a problem. After taking my 19th step, I bring my trailing foot forward and align it with my leading foot. I then reset the step count to 19 steps. As before, I realign, tap, and wait for the progress bar to go to 100%. The first photo appears on the screen with 4 X's. I simply place my finger near the corner I wish to move and a magnifier appears. If I slide my finger on the screen quickly, the corners will move rapidly. But when I move my finger slowly, the X's will only move very slightly, which helps for setting the precise location of each corner. Note that if the magnifier hits the edge of the image, just lift your finger, bring it back near the X, and begin swiping again. When I finish aligning the 4 corners, I tap the check mark to lock in the corners, and repeat this process for the second image. After aligning the 4 corners on the second image, I tap the check mark again, and the dimensions appear on the screen. The measured dimensions have width on the first line, height on the second line, distance before steps on the third line, and distance after steps on the fourth line.